Hello, I'm Kyle.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And welcome to Mock Plus Channel News. Today's story is about DNA and genetic modifications.
Some news that will be covered tonight is future genetic modifications in the US Army, genetically modified foods, and a friend of 2 convicted felons.
Other stories include the growing of human organs on animals, curing allergies, Neanderthals coming back to life, and gene modification of humans and GM food.
Scientists have now found replacement ears in lab for the first time. The breakthrough will give hope to people who lost their ears in explosion or accidents. The team who has been making ears says that it could start making identical ears to the patient's own. The first one could be implanted within a year. People have been working on growing for 20 years. There hasn't been anyone can start it practical, says the director of tissue engineering. Using a computer model of a patient's remaining ear, scientists craft a titanium framework which is naturally occurred with protein. Now they are seeking approval from the Food and Drug Administration to implant these on patients within a year. The research was made for the armed forces about 4 years ago. This includes the top hospitals and universities that were rewarded 300 million grants for surgery.
Have you ever wondered if peanut allergies could be cured? The scientists at Stanford University Medical Center had the answer to your question. Scientists at Stanford University have discovered an effective way to stop irritation from the allergy step by step.
Scientists gathered 20 people who are allergic to peanuts, and they all completed 2 years of immunotherapy, which allowed them to eat 1 4-gram serving of peanuts daily without them having an allergic reaction.
This miracle is completed by patients taking an increasing amount of peanut powder to try desensitizing them to their allergy. Scientists asked the patients to stop eating peanuts for 3 months to see if their allergy would return when given a small amount of peanut powder again. 13 patients regained their allergy, while 7 did not.
Researchers did not locate any change in the genetic code itself. However, the DNA of the patient's immune cells changed due to the oral immunotherapy. Patients with low levels of DNA methylation can tolerate peanuts, while others that regained their allergy had an intermediate level.
Hey, I'm Brody.
Hello, I'm Ivan, and this is our story.
Neanderthals have been extinct for millions of years, but it is quite possible that they may be around again soon. Neanderthals were a relative species of us. Humans, Homo sapiens, they were quite larger and stronger than us, however died millions of years ago.
Harvard geneticist George Church claims he can recreate a Neanderthal. The usual method of replication is called nuclear transfer. However, this method requires a fully intact cell from a Neanderthal, of which there is none. However, Church proposes a new method of replicating Neanderthal, where Church would take a healthy human cell and edit the genome of its DNA so it would be identical with that of a Neanderthal. It would develop and act exactly as a Neanderthal would.
There are some ethical concerns of Neanderthals' chance at long-term survival due to viruses and bacteria that humans have developed an immune system to. Also, its mental and its emotional well-being is of concern.
In science, we have been looking at the gene modification of plants and animals. Usually, when these things are modified, they retain their main attributes, such as when canola is modified, it would only grow resistance to herbicide and grow faster, among other things. However, the modification of the human genes to create Neanderthal changes that human completely, no longer qualifying him or her as a human but as a Neanderthal.
DNA testing is used frequently in criminal cases to identify suspects. But how does it work? In this segment, we'll be looking at the objects used in DNA testing and how the forensics use their devices to catch their most wanted. So first, what is DNA? DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It stores information or genes that are about somebody's appearance, attitude, and characteristics. Also, why is it used? It's used to help identify criminals or find a culprit for an illegal action. The research for the suspect starts with a simple piece of evidence containing DNA, such as bone, blood, or flakes of dead skin, being collected from the crime scene. Back at the investigation centre, scientists extract the DNA from the nucleus and measure the sample size to ensure that it's at least 1/1000th of a gram or a nanogram. If it's smaller than the required amount, then the scientists need to extract more DNA from the nucleus of the criminal cells. Other key evidence is found that may relate or prove that the suspect is a certain person. On legal terms and enough evidence, a sample of the suspect can be compared to the cells included in the evidence, and if the DNA matches, the suspect will be arrested and trialed.
Scientists have been making progress in gene modification using cutting-edge technology. Scientists believe they will be able to change people's DNA, making them a healthier and better person and be able to have a better life. Before gene modification, it was a risky and also very dangerous process, but using these new forms of gene modification, scientists are able to treat genetic disorders like Down syndrome. Now using gene modification, scientists can find a cure for people with Alzheimer's, and it is expected within the next few years there will be a cure to stop the disease from progressing any further. But for now there is a new medication, a nasal spray packed with healthy versions of the defective genes which will be able to slow down the disease.
The development of these new forms of gene modification are going to progress further and further within the next few years, and is going to be able to help many people in the future. Thank you for watching. Back to the news desk.
In the prac on February 27th, the class of Miss Thompson, we did a DNA strand where we had to copy a diagram from an instruction book. We had to use techno pieces to make the DNA strand. We had to make 2 straight ones, and then we had to put a red piece through the middle to bend or fold the DNA strand. Also, we had to draw a diagram in our books. I drew the diagram to help me better understand how a DNA strand is better. The prac teach me how to make the DNA strand out of techno piece. What was difficult was trying to bend the DNA strand and putting a red techno piece through the middle. What I learned about making the DNA strand was putting it all together and tried to bend the DNA strand, and we had to make 2 of the DNA strand made from techno pieces. The science behind the prac was to see what DNA looked like out of techno piece and use chromosomes to power up the DNA strand model using the pieces of techno that it was made out of.
Video games have had DNA modification in them, but they really haven't had a major role in the storyline. Some games have had it in the storyline, like Infamous, Bioshock, Resident Evil and Prototype. All of these games have had DNA and gene modification. It also helps people to understand what this could accomplish, although it's very unlikely to happen.
Games over the years have been influenced by many things. One of these things is gene modification. The existence of gene modification has helped give ideas for new games. Some of these games include popular titles such as StarCraft, Bioshock and Infamous. All these games include the use of gene modification in some way.
Which modify the stem cells, allowing the computer to harness different powers. Infamous uses gene modification in order to learn new abilities, and is the reason why the main character has become the way he is.
Alien race known as the Zerg, which mutate themselves into different buildings and different types of Zerg units, and they strive for genetic perfection.
The known game that involves gene modification is Resident Evil. Resident Evil includes the use of the virus known as a T-virus, which attacks the blood cells, killing the host and reanimating them to the Walking Dead. The last game that was mentioned is Prototype. The game is based around a test subject named Alex Mercer, who was being experimented on since birth and eventually escapes. The scientists that were experimenting on him, the scientists injected him with a virus which mutated his genetic structure, making him pretty much invulnerable.
There are many more games that include some form of gene modification, and there will be many more to come in future development. Having gene modification in games was a really good thing. Adding it into the games has made for really good storylines and gameplay.
Also, what I found interesting in science, that you can modify food, get DNA tests to see that you can see if you have some diseases, and that you can change the baby's features while they're still in the mother's womb.
During science, we constructed a DNA molecule which makes an appearance in Resident Evil. When I first saw a DNA molecule in the game, I didn't really understand what it was, but now I learnt about it in science.
Thank you for watching Mock Pulse Channel News.
Good job, Carl.
Good job, Anthony.